At 10:14 p.m., when the city of Silverbridge folded itself into a restless sleep beneath its swaying neon lights, CEO Vivian Locke stood alone on the balcony of her penthouse, palms resting on the railing as if she needed its cold steel to anchor her against the weight pressing inside her chest. The rain had just passed, leaving the scent of wet asphalt rising from the streets below. A pale mist clung to the riverbanks, moving like a slow, ghostly tide that refused to leave. Vivian closed her eyes and inhaled sharply. Her days were filled with reports, investor calls, product delays, board tensions, hidden betrayals, and the endless pounding ache of responsibility. But her nights were worse. Nights stripped her clean. Nights forced her into a silence she could no longer distract herself from. Nights brought back the memory of her brother, the way he looked at her in the hospital bed, the way his fingers trembled when he tried to hold her hand, the way she had promised she would fix everything, and the way she had failed. A faint sound behind her made her open her eyes. The sliding door hadn't been opened. No one else lived here. No assistant would dare intrude. But the sound had been real, a soft thump, like a paper landing on tile. Vivian stepped inside. A folded sheet of white paper lay at the center of her living room floor. She froze. There were only two ways for something to appear inside a penthouse secured by biometric locks. Either someone had broken in without leaving a trace, or someone inside her own company wanted her attention badly enough to slip past every barrier she had built. Her pulse tightened. She picked up the paper. No signature, no threat, just two handwritten lines. Floor 29. Don't ignore the vibration. Vivian exhaled through her teeth. The handwriting was the same as the notes she'd been receiving all month. The same notes she had tried to brush off as eccentric warnings from an overly observant night custodian. Marcus Hale. Always silent. Always watchful. Always appearing in places where a janitor shouldn't need to be. She'd watched him for days, trying to decipher him. And every time she looked closely, she noticed things that didn't match. The precise way he moved, the way he listened to machines, the tiny scars on his knuckles, the haunted look that flickered behind his eyes when he thought she wasn't watching. Vivian folded the note tightly between her fingers. She wasn't the kind of woman who obeyed cryptic warnings, but she also wasn't the kind of woman who ignored her instinct. The same instinct that had built a billion-dollar robotics empire from ground bone and steel. She grabbed her coat, stepped into the private elevator, and pressed 29. The elevator doors slid open into an empty, dimly lit hallway. At first glance, nothing looked out of place. Then she felt it. The faintest tremor beneath her feet, like a heartbeat buried under concrete. Not natural, not random, not safe. Vivian knelt, pressing her fingertips to the cold floor. The vibration came in intervals. 3 seconds. Pause. 3 seconds. Pause. The signature of a failing pressure regulator. Her breath caught. If the regulator below floor 29 failed entirely, the coolant system feeding the entire east wing would blow, shutting down prototypes, risking chemical leakage, and potentially causing an explosion that would cripple the building. Someone had engineered a catastrophe, and the only person who had warned her was the janitor no one listened to. A faint click echoed behind her. Vivian spun. Marcus Hale stood at the end of the hallway, a toolbox in one hand, a small industrial flashlight in the other. Rain clung to his jacket. His dark hair was damp, pushed back from his forehead. He wasn't startled to see her. If anything, he looked sad. "You came," he said quietly. His voice wasn't triumphant. It wasn't frightened. It was tired. The exhaustion of a man who'd been fighting a silent war alone. Vivian stood slowly, every instinct sharpened. "What's happening on this floor?" she asked. Marcus stepped closer. The hallway lights framed him in a pale glow that softened the edges of his hardened expression. "You're in danger," he said, "and so is everyone who works in this building." Vivian felt the words like a cold current against her spine. "Explain," she demanded. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he knelt beside the panel at the hallway's center, tracing the metal with his fingertips. His movements were precise, efficient. Not the hesitations of a janitor guessing at a problem, but the certainty of a man who understood the building's infrastructure intimately. "This regulator wasn't just neglected," he murmured. "It was tampered with." Vivian felt her throat tighten. "By whom?" Marcus finally looked up at her. "The same people who ruined my life," he said. "And now they want to ruin yours." Vivian's breath stilled in her chest. He stood slowly, setting the toolbox aside. "Before we go any further," he said softly, "you need to know. I wasn't always a janitor. I wasn't hired to mop floors. I was hired to disappear, to scrape by, to stay out of sight." Vivian's pulse hammered in her ears. Marcus swallowed hard. "I used to be an engineer here," he said. "Your company once carried my signature on its blueprints." The world around Vivian seemed to tilt. She searched his eyes, expecting lies, instability, delusion. But what she found was something far more dangerous. Truth. Grief. A burden heavy enough to crush a man from the inside. "I suffered a loss," Marcus whispered, "and someone made sure the blame fell on me. The board expelled me, stripped my credentials, and buried the evidence. They thought I'd fade away." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "But when I saw they were setting the same trap for you, I couldn't stay quiet." Vivian didn't move. The distance between them held the weight of two people who had been broken in different ways, but broken all the same. "Why me?" she whispered. Marcus hesitated. "Because you still believe in fixing things," he said, "and because you carry your grief the same way I carry mine. Hidden, but not dead." The words hit her harder than any boardroom attack ever had. But before she could respond, a deep rumble trembled beneath the floor, louder this time, more aggressive. Marcus cursed under his breath. "We're out of time." He grabbed her hand. "Vivian, you need to trust me. If we don't act now, this building won't survive the next 30 minutes. Trust. A fragile word for a woman who trusted nothing. But for reasons she couldn't explain, Vivian let him pull her toward the service stairwell. The metal door slammed shut behind them. What lay ahead would unravel every truth she thought she knew, about her company, about the people around her, and about herself. But in this moment, all she felt was the strange, undeniable certainty that the man leading her down the dark stairwell was not a janitor. He was something far more dangerous. He was someone who cared, someone who'd been broken before, someone who had chosen, for reasons she could not understand yet, to save her. And so began the night that would change everything. The stairwell swallowed them whole. Concrete walls rose on either side, sweating faint dampness. The emergency strip lights along the steps flickered in sickly intervals, as if they too were unsure whether to stay alive. Vivian's hand trailed the cold railing as Marcus pulled her downward, their footsteps steady, echoing like a second pair of ghosts following close behind. "Marcus," she said, breath controlled but tight. "What exactly are we heading into?" "A choice," he replied. She hated answers like that. Ambiguous, quiet, heavy with meaning and completely useless in a crisis. "Give me specifics," she pressed. "What is going to fail? How many redundancies? What's the radius if it blows?" He shot her a quick look over his shoulder, an almost surprised flicker in his eyes, as if he'd been waiting to see if she would think like an engineer or like a frightened executive. "The regulator on 29 is part of the secondary coolant loop," he said. "They've redirected part of its load to the East Wing's AI vault, probably to overpressure it. If it ruptures, superheated coolant will flood the conduits and hit the main cluster." "Catastrophic thermal runaway," she murmured. He nodded once. "You lose the prototypes, maybe the whole East Wing. If it hits the server racks before emergency isolation, you also lose 2 decades of research." She exhaled slowly. "And lives?" His jaw tightened. "Anyone working late in the East Wing doesn't make it out in time if the breach opens fully." They reached a landing. Marcus stopped and pressed his palm lightly against the wall, eyes half closed, listening. It took Vivian a second to realize what he was doing. He wasn't just hearing the building, he was reading it. "Vibrations stronger," he murmured. "We're close." He moved again, and she followed, irritation and admiration warring inside her. She'd built this tower from contracts and funding, from speeches and negotiations. But he moved through it like a person who had once sketched its skeleton on paper. "You said you were an engineer here," she said as they descended. "Why don't I know your name?" He let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Because the story they wrote about me isn't one CEOs are allowed to read." The line hung there, like a weight suspended between them. Vivian, who knew very well what it meant to be given only curated truths, said nothing. On the next landing, the stairs opened onto a low corridor, narrower, older. This level hadn't been renovated when she modernized the building. It still bore the bones of the previous era: exposed piping, chipped paint, a faint smell of oil and dust. Marcus slowed, shoulders tightening. "What is it?" she asked. "We're beneath the East Wing now," he said. "The regulator assembly should be in that direction." He pointed down the corridor, where a red door stood with a faded stenciled label, AUX Regi 2B, authorized techs only. Vivian scanned her badge out of habit. The reader beeped green. "It still recognizes me," she murmured. "For now," Marcus said. He pushed the door open. The air hit them in a wave, hot, metallic, tinged with the faint sweetness of overheated coolant. Machines thrummed inside the room, a deep, restless noise. A forest of pipes, valves, and heat exchangers crowded the space. In the center, a cylindrical regulator the size of a small car shuddered with a too-rapid vibration. Vivian knew enough about systems to recognize one thing immediately. This machine was not operating within tolerance. Marcus crossed to it quickly, laying a hand on the metal casing, his lips compressed into a thin line. "They drove it past the safety threshold," he said. "Emergency override should have tripped and shut it down." It didn't. "So they disabled the override," she said. He nodded. "And rerouted part of the line. They want an explosive failure. It's not just negligence." Vivian moved closer, scanning the control panel. The indicator lights blinked red and amber, cycling through error codes. Someone had bypassed the normal interface and patched in a crude external board, wires clamped onto the main bus. "I recognize that firmware," she said slowly. "It's from an old test batch we scrapped 5 years ago." Marcus gave her a searching look. "Who had access?" She didn't have to think long. "Technical director, 2 senior engineers, and—" her jaw tightened. "And the board's liaison. He insisted on reviewing every systems update personally." Marcus's eyes darkened. "They used my blueprint to burn me once. They're using yours to burn you now." Vivian hated how accurate that sounded. "Can you stabilize it?" she asked. "Yes," he said. No hesitation. "But I'll need manual access to the valve cluster, and I need you on the control panel."
She blinked. I'm not the one who... You're the only person here whose override code can't be casually revoked by the board, he said quietly. They can't afford to lock you out without drawing attention. You still have access they think you're too busy to use. Vivian swallowed hard. She'd spent years letting others touch the guts of the machine while she handled investors and narratives. She'd told herself it was efficiency. But standing here with the building's heart trembling out of rhythm, she realized what it had really been. Distance. A kind of denial. Tell me what to do, she said. He nodded once, like a craftsman acknowledging another craft. On my signal, you'll need to throttle down the input line in increments of 5% every 4 seconds. If you cut it too fast, the pressure will spike before it has somewhere to go. And you? I'll be opening a bypass and re-engaging a physical failsafe they thought was obsolete. He moved around the cylinder, squeezing between pipes until he disappeared from view. Vivian took her place at the panel. Her hands hovered over the manual controls, fingers oddly steady. Ready? His voice called. She didn't answer with words. She laid her palm on the emergency dial and waited. Now, he called. She rotated the dial. The panel chirped, complaining, but obeyed. Input flow dropped to 95%. The vibration changed, shifting from a desperate rattle to a tense, uneven shudder. Again, he called. She continued. 90, 85, 80. With each adjustment, the regulator's trembling subsided by degrees, like an animal slowly ceasing to thrash. She could hear Marcus working behind the machine, metal clanking softly, valves turning with reluctant groans. 60%, he said. Hold. She held. Sweat gathered at the back of her neck. The room's heat pressed closer. But she didn't move. Okay, Marcus called. I've opened a pressure bleed. We're going to let the excess into the auxiliary loop. It'll strain the system, but it won't kill it. You're sure? She asked. Sure enough to be the one standing closest if I'm wrong, he said. The answer was not comforting, but it was honest. Drop it to 40, he said. She obeyed. The regulator's vibration eased into a low hum. The error lights shifted, faltered, then settled into a single amber glow. Not perfect, not safe in the long term, but no longer on the edge of explosion. Vivian let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. It's stable, she said. For now, Marcus replied, emerging from behind the machine, wiping a smear of coolant from his wrist. His face shone with perspiration, but his eyes were calmer. You bought yourself time, he said. Maybe a week before it needs a full teardown. Bought myself, she echoed. You mean bought us. He shook his head lightly. They weren't going to fire a janitor over a regulator failure. They were going to crucify their CEO. Vivian studied him. You keep saying they, as if you know them well. He leaned against a pipe, finally allowing his shoulders to sag for a moment. I do, he said. They used to sign my paychecks. Vivian's voice was softer when she spoke again. Tell me what happened, Marcus. He seemed to brace himself differently at that, not against danger, but against memory. There was a fire, he began. Not here, at another facility, a test site your company once leased. We were trialing a safety algorithm for industrial drones. My team warned the director that the thermal feedback loop was unstable. The simulation showed a 5% chance of runaway. He called it acceptable risk. Vivian's mouth flattened. Acceptable risk. She'd heard that phrase more times than she could count, almost always from people who wouldn't be anywhere near the consequences. On paper, he continued, the fail-safes were adequate. In reality, the staff was overworked, the maintenance was behind, and the local fire system hadn't been updated in years. He swallowed, eyes distant. My daughter was there that day. Lila. She was 10. Vivian stiffened. A part of her already knew what came next. She wasn't supposed to be, he said quickly, as if that made it better somehow. I'd picked her up from school because she wasn't feeling well. I just needed to grab one last firmware log, then we were going home. 10 minutes, I told her. 10 minutes. His hand tightened around the rag he was holding. Coolant smeared across his knuckles. There was a power fluctuation. One drone misread the temperature. Overheated. The thermal sensor fed the wrong data into the cluster, and the entire system activated the wrong sequence. Sparks hit the storage racks. Old chemicals. The fire suppression system saw the wrong values. It didn't trigger. Smoke filled the corridor faster than I thought possible. Vivian's chest ached with each word, as if the story were soldering itself onto her ribs. I tried to get her out, Marcus whispered. I did. I found her on the floor near the lab door. She'd tried to come find me. I carried her outside. He stared at something she couldn't see. They said she died on the way to the hospital. I know that isn't true. She died when someone signed off on acceptable risk and refused to fix what we all knew was wrong. The room was silent except for the regulator's low hum. I filed reports, he said. I documented everything. I sent copies to the board, to regulators, to anyone who would listen. They thanked me for my concern. Then they accused me of misconfiguring the system, of bypassing safety protocols, of being an unstable liability after my personal tragedy. He laughed once, bitter and soft. They erased me, and they kept the contracts. And yet you're here, Vivian said quietly. Back in the lion's den. Because the lion's den is the only place left where the bars and hinges match the ones in my memory, he replied. Your tower runs on an evolved version of the same architecture, the same philosophy, efficiency, profit, elegance, and underneath it, the same cracks. He moved away from the pipe, steady again. I took the custodial job because it let me move through the veins of the building unseen, because someone had to listen to the machines properly, and because I thought, if I could stop even one more disaster from happening, maybe Lila's ghost might finally rest. Vivian's throat tightened. She had never believed in ghosts in the literal sense, but she knew what it meant to live haunted. To wake in the middle of the night hearing her brother's voice, to sit in presentations feeling his empty chair next to her, to make every decision with the weight of one unfixable moment pressing on her spine. I'm sorry, she said. They were small words. Inadequate. But she let them carry all the weight she could. Marcus gave a slight shrug, as if he didn't know what to do with sympathy. It doesn't matter what happens to me, he said. What matters is that they don't get to do this again. To you, to your staff, to anyone. Vivian straightened, her executive mind snapping back into alignment with the new information. The regulator is stable, she said slowly, thinking aloud. So the immediate crisis is contained, but someone still plans to sabotage the AI vault tomorrow. He nodded. They'll have backup triggers. This was just one of them. All right, she said. Then we don't just patch leaks tonight. We expose the entire pipeline. He gave her a curious look. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, she said, that for the first time in a long time, I'm done letting other people decide what I get to know. She stepped toward the door. You said the same people who ruined your life are trying to ruin mine. Then tomorrow, I want you in that room when we confront them. His eyebrows lifted. I'm a janitor, Vivian. They won't listen to me. Oh, I know they won't, she said, a small, dangerous calm settling over her. That's why they'll be listening to me, and I'll be listening to you. He studied her for a long moment as if deciding whether to believe that a woman like her, a CEO with the world's attention and enough power to ruin him again if she chose, could be trusted. What if they try to bury this too? he asked. What if they bury you? Vivian thought of the boardroom, of polished shoes and polished lies, of old men who'd patted her shoulder after her brother died, telling her how proud he'd be of her if she stayed focused. She thought of standing by her brother's hospital bed, promising to make the world safer, then building machines that had, in some distant corner, failed a child named Lila. They've been trying to bury me in expectations and fear since the day I took this job, she said. Maybe it's time I stopped letting them. A faint, tired smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. All right, Marcus said. Then tomorrow, I'll be there. And tonight, I'll keep the building alive. Not alone, she replied. He blinked. You needed me at the panel, she said. I'll need you in the boardroom. It's time we stop pretending we're living separate stories. He looked at her differently then, not as an emblem of the company that had destroyed him, not as a distant authority, but as a person standing at the same edge he once fell from. Fair enough, he said softly. He closed the regulator panel and picked up his toolbox. Go home, he said. Sleep if you can. Eat something if you can't. You're giving orders now? She asked, one eyebrow lifting. Call it a recommendation from the guy who knows what happens when you walk into a war half-conscious. She almost smiled. Fine, she said, but promise me one thing. What? If anything else shifts tonight, any tremor, any alarm, any anomaly, you call me directly. His brow furrowed. That's not necessary. I can... It's not a request, Marcus. She pulled her phone from her pocket, opened a new contact, and held it out to him. Your number, she said. Now. His gaze flicked from the phone to her face, as if this were the strangest part of the night. He typed. Her phone buzzed with the incoming contact, Marcus H. She sent him a single dot in reply so he'd have hers. Now it's a shared war, she said. He nodded slowly. Good night, Vivian. Good night, she replied. As she walked back through the corridor and up the stairs, something in her chest felt different. Not lighter. Nothing could erase the years overnight. But aligned. As if a piece of a puzzle she didn't know she'd been assembling had finally snapped into place. By the time she reached the lobby, the lights had stabilized. The security guard was back at the desk, oblivious to the crisis that had nearly rewritten all their futures. Working late again, Ms. Locke? He asked with a friendly smile. Just making sure everything's in order, she said. As the elevator doors closed around her, Vivian caught a final glimpse of her tower in the security monitors, a tall, gleaming spear of glass and steel cutting into the night. For the first time in years, she didn't see it as her cage. She saw it as her responsibility. And she knew, with a strange, almost painful clarity, that tomorrow would be the day she stopped hiding behind polished reports and started asking what the machines, and the people who fixed them, had been trying to tell her all along. That night, she didn't sleep. But she didn't pace either. She sat at her dining table with a legal pad and pen, old tools she hadn't touched in years, and began to write. She wrote down everything Marcus had told her, names, dates, phrases like acceptable risk and personal liability and non-disclosure settlement. She drew lines between events, tracing patterns like circuit paths. She wrote her brother's name in the margin and circled it once, hard. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, she realized something that made her hand tremble. This wasn't just about sabotage. It wasn't even just about Marcus. It was about a culture, a way of thinking she had inherited, absorbed, and perpetuated more than she wanted to admit. A world where numbers trumped faces, where near misses were celebrated instead of corrected, where grief was a private inconvenience rather than a call to change. If she walked into that boardroom tomorrow and simply defended herself, she would be participating in the same game that killed Lila and nearly destroyed Marcus. If she walked in with the truth, the whole truth, then she would be starting a different game entirely, and she had no idea how to win that one. Her phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m. A message from Marcus. Regulator holding steady. No new faults so far. Lobby sensors show 3 unknown access attempts around 2:30 a.m., but none successful. Likely probing. I'm logging everything. Get some rest. She stared at the message longer than she needed to. Then she wrote one reply, her fingers hovering before pressing send. Thank you. For staying. She almost added, you didn't have to, but stopped. He knew that. She knew that. What mattered wasn't obligation. It was choice. By the time the pale light of dawn began to wash the river's surface in gray, Vivian had filled 10 pages, not with excuses, not with a defense, with questions. Questions she planned to ask, out loud, in a room where nobody liked questions. At 7:58 a.m., she walked into Lock Dynamics with her hair pulled back, her suit simple but immaculate, dark circles under her eyes, and a strange, quiet fire in her chest. Employees greeted her with the usual mix of respect and distance. Some smiled politely. Some avoided eye contact. Most had no idea how close they'd come last night to losing their workplace or their lives. Her assistant, Mara, hurried to meet her. Good morning, Ms. Locke. The board moved up the meeting to 9. They said it's urgent. Of course they did, Vivian murmured. Also, Mara continued, lowering her voice, there's a custodial worker waiting outside your office. He said you told him to meet you. Her tone suggested she suspected this was either some new form of efficiency or an elaborate mistake. He's not a custodial worker, Vivian said. Mara blinked. Oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed. So did everyone, Vivian replied. You're not alone. Mara's brow creased. She wasn't used to her boss speaking this gently, or this cryptically. Should I reschedule him? She asked. No, Vivian said. Send him in as soon as I'm in my office. And Mara? Yes, Ms. Locke? Vivian hesitated only a heartbeat. You've worked here 6 years, correct? 7, as of last month. You've seen things that didn't make sense. Times when we looked the other way. Times when we celebrated outcomes that made you uncomfortable. Mara flushed slightly, caught off guard by being this seen. I wouldn't want to assume. It's okay, Vivian said softly. Today, I want you to assume. I want you to notice. And if you see anything strange, especially around security or technical staff, you tell me directly. Not HR, not compliance. Me. Yes, Ms. Locke, Mara said, something like relief passing over her face. I will. In her office, the morning light cut across the polished floor. The city spread out below like a circuit board. For a brief moment, Vivian let herself stand at the window and breathe. When she turned, Marcus was standing near the door, hat held in his hands, uniform clean but frayed at the cuffs. He seemed smaller here than in the machine room, but no less composed. Good morning, he said. Is it? She asked. He considered that for a second. It's still a morning, he replied. Against her will, the corner of her mouth twitched. Sit, she said, gesturing toward a chair. He sat stiffly, as if unused to chairs that faced city skylines instead of boilers. You said they'll probably come after you today, he said. The board. They will, she said. On the surface, the agenda is about the AI demonstration and budget allocations. Underneath, it'll be about control. They'll want a scapegoat. They'll probe last night. They'll frame concerns. They'll test how afraid I am. And are you? He asked. She thought about that. Yes, she said honestly. But I'm more afraid of staying the person who let this happen than I am of becoming the one who fights it. His gaze softened in a way that had nothing to do with pity. That's usually how change starts, he said quietly. Fear. Redirected. She nodded once. I need you with me in the meeting, she said. They won't like that, he replied. They don't have to like it, she said. They just have to be present when the truth walks into the room. I'll tell them you're here to explain a systems issue. It's not a lie. And when they try to discredit me, he asked. They'll try, she agreed. They'll say you're unstable, vindictive, that you have an agenda. They'll try to bury you in the story they wrote about you years ago. He tilted his head. And you? I'll ask them, she said, why a man they claim is unstable was the only one who noticed a catastrophic fault in our regulator before it killed people. I'll ask them why he was the only one who tried to stop them from orchestrating another acceptable risk. And then, he pressed. And then, she said quietly, we'll see who else in that room is tired of being afraid. He watched her in silence for a few seconds. You know this could end with you being pushed out, he said, or quietly cornered, or publicly blamed. I know, she replied, but it's funny. What is? Last night, when we were standing in front of that regulator, I realized that for years I've been terrified of falling from this position, of losing this title, of becoming what they consider a failure. She looked out the window for a moment, then back at him. And then I met someone who lost everything, and somehow decided to come back here anyway, not to reclaim status, but to keep people alive. That scares me more than losing my job, Marcus. The idea that I've been more attached to my power than to my humanity. I can't keep living like that. A shadow of something like astonishment crossed his features, that she would say it so plainly. Okay, he said softly. Then I'm with you. For as long as they let me through the door. And after that? She asked. His smile was small, wry. Machines always need fixing, he said. If they lock me out of this building, I'll find another broken thing. It's what I know how to do. She held his gaze, and there was a moment, brief but unmistakable, when she understood that this alliance was not about saving one another. It was about walking together through a fire each had once walked alone. At 9:02 a.m., the boardroom doors closed with their usual soft finality, the kind that made hearings feel like private rituals. Around the long, polished table, the board members sat in varying degrees of discomfort and expectation. Coffee cups, tablets, expensive watches, a veneer of control. Franklin Reed, the board's unofficial leader and one of the company's earliest investors, straightened his tie and cleared his throat. Vivian, he began, I trust your morning went well. As well as any morning that starts with a near calamity, she said calmly. Murmurs rippled. Franklin's smile flickered. Near calamity? He echoed. If there was a serious incident, we should have been informed. You will be, she said. In fact, that's what this meeting is about. Before he could reply, the door at the far end opened. Marcus stepped in. The board members' expressions shifted in unison. Confusion, annoyance, faint disdain. Who is this? One of them asked. This, Vivian said, is Marcus Hale. He works night shift on our custodial team. And why, another board member said, is he in a confidential strategy meeting? Because, Vivian replied, he's the reason we are not currently giving this presentation in front of a smoldering crater. Silence fell more completely than if she'd shouted. She let it sit. We had a regulator fault in the East Wing last night, she continued. A fault that, left unchecked, would have caused critical damage to our AI vault and possibly cost lives. Our technical systems did not flag it appropriately. Our automated redundancies did not respond as designed. But Mr. Hale noticed. He warned me. He helped stabilize it. Murmurs again, sharper this time. Franklin's eyes narrowed at Marcus. "Is this true?" he asked. Marcus didn't flinch. "Yes, sir," he said. "It is. And you didn't report this to your direct supervisor?" another board member demanded. "I've submitted dozens of reports over the past month," Marcus said, "about minor anomalies. All of them went unread, so I brought this one directly to the person whose name would be on the headlines." Franklin's jaw ticked. "That's not how chain of command works," he said. "No," Marcus agreed. "It's how conscience works." Vivian watched the exchange with a strange dual awareness. Part of her observing as CEO, part of her observing as someone waking up in her own story. "We appreciate your vigilance, Mr. Hale," Franklin said tightly, "but such matters should be handled by qualified personnel." "Then you should hire more of them," Marcus replied quietly, "instead of promoting the ones who call preventable disasters acceptable risk." The room chilled. Franklin's gaze snapped to Vivian. "Why is he here, Vivian?" he asked, voice clipped. "If there was a fault, it's been contained. Maintenance can handle the rest. We have an AI demonstration to finalize and investors to brief." "That's precisely why he's here," she said. "Because you are asking me to stand in front of investors and assure them our systems are safe, when we both know that for years we have treated safety as a checkbox instead of a priority." One of the older board members harumphed. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious reality," she said. "Where is this coming from?" Franklin pressed. "We have a strong safety record." "We have a record of avoiding headlines," she said. "That's not the same as being safe." She slid a folder onto the table. Inside were copies of the notes she'd made last night, along with printed logs Marcus had sent her. "These," she said, "are the anomalies Mr. Hale has logged. These are the times our sensors misread, our alarms delayed, our minor faults were patched instead of investigated. And these," she pulled another set of pages, "are records from an incident 3 years ago at a test facility our company leased. A facility where a child named Lila Hale died during a preventable system failure." Franklin shifted uncomfortably. "We addressed that matter," he said. "Extensively. It was investigated, liability determined, compensation offered. It was a tragedy," Vivian cut in. "Yes, I've read the sanitized language." She looked at Marcus just for a second. "Now I've heard the other version." A younger board member frowned. "You spoke to an involved engineer without counsel present?" "He wasn't an involved engineer in your reports," she said. "In your reports, he was the convenient scapegoat blamed to protect a broken system. He lost his child. He lost his career. Our culture moved on." Franklin's face hardened. "What exactly are you implying, Vivian?" he asked. She met his gaze directly. "I'm not implying anything," she said. "I'm stating it. We have built a company that talks about innovation and safety while quietly rewarding those who cut corners and silencing those who speak up. We buried one man's grief under legal language. We almost buried another catastrophe last night under the same." "Oh, come now," another board member said, spreading his hands. "This is melodramatic. Every complex system has near misses. That's why we build redundancies." "And when redundancies fail?" she asked. "Who do we blame then? Janitors? Engineers who don't have the power to say no? Or the people in this room who signed off on budgets that prioritized marketing over maintenance?" Franklin's voice dropped, dangerous and low. "You're treading on thin ice." "Yes," she said. I know. It's been thin for a long time. I just stopped pretending not to notice. He leaned back, studying her. What do you want, Vivian? He asked. Forgive the bluntness, but I need clarity. Are you seeking to restructure? To rebrand? I'm seeking to tell the truth, she said simply. He looked at Marcus again. And what does he have to do with truth? Franklin asked. Marcus answered before Vivian could. I have my failures, he said softly. I made mistakes. I trusted people I shouldn't have. I signed off on tests I should have fought harder to stop. But the difference between you and me is that my mistakes cost me everything, and you made sure yours cost you nothing. The words were quiet. Not an outburst. Not a performance. A mirror. A few board members shifted, the discomfort tangible. If we are done entertaining philosophy from a janitor, one man snapped, I suggest we move to the AI launch agenda. Vivian looked at him steadily. Do you know why he's a janitor now? She asked. It's hardly relevant. It's entirely relevant, she said. Because when you decided he was a liability instead of a warning, you didn't just destroy his career. You sent a message to everyone else that speaking up is the fastest way to lose everything. And that message is still echoing through our halls. She let that sink in, then continued. Tomorrow I am supposed to stand on a stage and tell the world that our AI will make their factories safer, their homes smarter, their lives easier. I cannot do that honestly if we are still the same company that punished the man who tried to stop a child from dying. Franklin's gaze sharpened. What are you proposing? He asked carefully. A few things, she said. First, we open a full independent investigation into last night's sabotage attempt with external auditors. No internal burying. No quiet scapegoats. Agreed, one board member said quickly, before others could object. If there was actual sabotage. There was, she said. I saw the tampered regulator. So did he. She nodded toward Marcus. Second, we review the Lila Hale case, fully. Not as a legal risk, but as a moral failure. We examine who knew what, who signed off on which documents, who chose profit over truth. Murmurs rose, angrier this time. That case is closed, a woman said. Reopening it will expose us to liability. It will expose us to conscience, Vivian said. I'm willing to face both. And third? Franklin asked. Third, she said, we formally restore Marcus Hale's engineering credentials. We hire him not as a janitor with ideas, but as a lead on a new division focused solely on safety and ethical system design. He reports directly to me. Not because we're doing him a favor, but because we're finally recognizing him for what he is. One of the only people in this building who still understands the cost of our failures in human terms. Marcus stared at her. He had known she would speak. He had not known she would stake this much. This is outrageous, someone snapped. We can't just hand a former liability a leadership role. Why? She asked. Because he remembers the dead better than we do? Franklin steepled his fingers. And if we refuse? He asked. She took a breath. Then I will resign, she said. Publicly. And when they ask me why, I will tell them everything we just discussed. The words fell like a dropped engine block. Time seemed to fracture. You'd destroy your own reputation? A woman asked, astonished. I'd be trading one reputation for another, she said. Right now, I'm the youngest CEO of a rising tech power. I could remain that woman and spend the next 20 years watching machines bear my company's name and wondering which ones will fail when they're needed most. She met each set of eyes in turn. Or I can become the woman who walked out when she realized her company would rather bury the truth than change, and then I can help build something else. And where would you go? Franklin asked,
Not out of curiosity, but as a test. She smiled faintly. You forget, she said. I built this once. I can build again. The question is whether I build with you or in spite of you. Silence stretched. In that silence, something shifted. Not dramatically, not with a shout, but with a series of small internal clicks as certain board members weighed lawsuits, headlines, investor reactions, their own legacies. At last, the oldest member, a woman who had been quiet until now, her gray hair pinned neatly, her hands folded, spoke. I lost a son to a faulty medical device 15 years ago, she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shone. Different industry, same language, acceptable risk, regrettable incident. No clear liability. I joined this board because I believed we could be better. She looked at Vivian, then at Marcus. For years I have voted with the majority, telling myself change takes time. I'm tired of waiting. I support the investigation, I support hiring Mr. Hale, and I support Ms. Locke's conditions. Murmurs again, surprised this time. Another board member, younger, nodded slowly. Investors care about ESG now more than ever, he said. We could either be dragged into this conversation later as villains, or step into it now as pioneers. Franklin shot him a look of annoyance. He sighed. You're asking us to open every old wound, he told Vivian. You're asking us to put our own house on trial. I'm asking you, she replied, to decide whether you want to be remembered as men and women who clung to comfort or as people who did something terrifying and right. He stared at her for a long, long moment. Then he looked at Marcus. And you, he said, if we agree to this, will you come back? After everything? Marcus's voice was quiet but clear. I'll come, he said, on one condition. Franklin's brow arched. You're in no position to make... Humor me, Marcus said softly. It's not about money or title. Franklin gestured impatiently. Speak. If I come back, Marcus said, I'm not here to make you feel better about yourselves. I'm here to design systems that will probably slow down some of your deals, complicate some launches, and force you to say no to contracts that ignore human risk. His eyes moved around the table. I'm here to be the man you will be tempted to resent, to call overcautious, to accuse of holding back innovation. If you hire me, I want it in writing that my division cannot be quietly shut down the first time I tell you no. Vivian watched him, something like fierce pride swelling in her chest. Franklin looked between the two of them, the janitor turned engineer and the CEO threatening to walk. At last, he exhaled, weary. You two are going to be the death of my blood pressure, he muttered. Is that a yes? Vivian asked. It's a conditional yes, he said. We form the committee. We hire him. We investigate. We manage the fallout. But in return, Vivian... Yes? You stay, he said. At least for now. We need you to weather this. She nodded once. I'll stay, she said. On one condition of my own. Of course, he said dryly. Everyone has conditions today. When the investigators ask you what happened, she said, you don't lie. Not to save me, not to save yourself, not to save the company. You tell them exactly what you signed, exactly what you knew, all of it. His gaze flickered, then steadied. Agreed, he said. The meeting continued. Logistics, committees, PR strategies. The usual machinery of damage control, except this time, something in its core had been rewired with an unfamiliar element. Honesty. Through it all, Marcus sat quietly at the end of the table, hands folded, listening.
Not like a man groveling his way back into respectability, but like someone watching the early movements of a machine he intended to overhaul. When it finally ended, the board members filed out, each carrying their own private storms. Vivian remained seated for a moment, hands on the table, eyes closed. "That was," Marcus began. "Terrifying?" she supplied. "Exhausting," he said. "Terrifying comes later when the backlash starts." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "You okay?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I came into this building expecting to mop floors and watch from the shadows until they pushed me out again," he said. "Instead, I watched you tell the people who ruined my life that you'd burn your own crown rather than keep pretending they were right." His shoulders lifted and dropped. "I'm not sure what I am, but I know I'm not numb. That's new." She rose. "Come on," she said. "There's something I need to show you." He followed her down the hallway, past offices and glass-walled conference rooms, where employees sat in neat rows, unaware that their company's foundations had just shifted an inch. She stopped at a door with no label, swiped her badge. The lock clicked. Inside, the room was spacious but stark, a lab that had never been finished. Workbenches, shelving, a few unopened crates pushed against the far wall. "I set this space aside last year," she said. "It was supposed to be a vision lab for future products. We never staffed it. Too many fires elsewhere, too many investors craving faster releases." She turned to him. "It's yours now," she said. "If you want it, for safety prototypes, for redesigning the systems that failed you, for building things that make sure no one else's 10-minute errand turns into a lifelong wound." He stepped into the room as if stepping onto sacred ground. The light from the window fell across his face, carving shadows under his eyes. "A lab," he whispered. "With my name on the door?" "That part will take a week," she said. "Signage is slow." He laughed once, quietly, the sound unfamiliar in his own mouth. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes," she replied. "I do. I can't change what happened to your daughter. I can't bring back my brother. But I can stop pretending that all we owe the dead is privately held regret." He swallowed hard. "Lila loved robots," he said, voice soft. "She used to draw designs on napkins, machines with big cartoon eyes that could help old people walk or fetch things from high shelves." He smiled a little, lost in the memory. "She told me once, 'Daddy, your machines are like friends you haven't met yet.' After the fire, I thought those words were cursed." Vivian felt tears burn behind her own eyes. "They're not cursed," she said. He looked at her. "Then what are they?" he asked. "A promise," she said. "One we keep when we choose to build honoring the people we've lost, not forgetting them." Silence fell between them, but it was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of a room that understood it was about to witness something new. He walked to the nearest workbench and set his toolbox down, almost reverently. "Okay," Marcus said. "Then let's start by redesigning the system that killed her. Properly this time." "And after that?" she asked. He looked up, eyes clearer than she'd ever seen them. "After that," he said, "we redesign the way this company thinks about failure." She nodded. Outside the window, Silverbridge moved through its day. Cars, trains, pedestrians, all wrapped in their own small universes of worry and hope. Inside the unused lab, two people who had stayed too long in their private grief began, clumsily and bravely, to step into something else. Not redemption. That would take years. but something quieter and perhaps more enduring. A new pattern.
One where a janitor was allowed to be an engineer again, where a CEO dared to risk her throne for her soul. Where machines were no longer built in isolation from the people they could fail. The world outside didn't notice the shift. But within the walls of Lock Dynamics, the hum of change had begun. Subtle, stubborn, like the first low vibration of a machine that has decided, against all odds, to come back to life.